Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the kickoff event of our Made in HFA Alumni Panel and Career Workshop Series. My name is Kylie Sharp. I work as an academic advisor in the College of Humanities and Fine Arts here at Chico State, and I'm going to be serving as our moderator today. Today's panel is themed Storytellers and Archivists, and this panel features 4 of the alumni from our college who have gone on to build careers related to the creation, sharing, translating, and/or recording of stories. So I will go ahead and give a round of introductions here. First, we have Garrett Root. Garrett is a senior architectural historian and office principal at Paleo West LLC, a cultural resource and paleontology consulting firm. Garrett graduated from Chico State with a BA in history and a certificate in public history in 2009. He went on to earn an MA in public history from Sacramento State in 2011. And over the past decade, he has worked at several consulting firms, serving as an architectural historian on hundreds of projects located in California, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska. Today, Garrett oversees the operations, business development, and technical execution of cultural resources work for Paleo West's Northern California operations. He supervises 15 full-time archaeologists and architectural historians and an additional 25 part-time staff, but still manages to use the research and writing skills learned at Chico State daily. Thank you, Garrett, for joining us. Next up, we have Yvette Ferriga. She graduated from Chico State in 2015 with a bachelor's of arts in Spanish and sociology. She currently works as a paralegal for a personal injury law firm, in Southern California, where she uses her language skills to document and record the stories of trauma presented by clients. Yvette has been in the legal field for about 4 years, but will be making a career change this fall by pursuing a master's degree in clinical psychology with the goal of becoming a bilingual marriage and family therapist. Hello, Yvette. How are you? Hi
everyone. I'm doing great.
Next up, we have Zachary Phillips. Zachary is an associate editor at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, where he focuses on serious and narrative nonfiction, including biography and memoir, history, cultural criticism, and issue-driven books. He is particularly interested in publishing queer stories and the stories that explore the nexus of gender, sexuality, race, and class. Previously, he worked as an assistant editor at Crown, an imprint of Penguin Random House. Hello, Zach.
Hi.
And last but not least, we have Kelly Reynolds. Kelly received her bachelor's in theater arts from Chico State in 2013 and went on to earn a Master of Fine Arts in Screenwriting from DePaul University in 2016. By day, Kelly works as a freelance writer, voice actor, and educator. By night, she hosts and produces a comedic romance novel podcast review called Boobies and Newbies. During her time here in Los Angeles, she worked with networks including MTV, Hallmark Channel, and Netflix. Kelly is currently finishing up her second book and developing an online sketch show with her Second City alum while living in the Twin Cities. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you each for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started with some questions for the whole panel. So we'll sort of go round robin and allow you all a few moments to answer. Students, faculty, and those in the audience, please take notes of any questions you may have for individual alums or for the group as a whole. And in about the last 15 minutes of this session, we'll open the floor for you to have conversations with our panelists. Without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. And if I could, I'm going to ask you these questions and I'll just have you respond in the order of introduction, if that works for everyone, that we kind of maintain some consistency there. So Garrett, we'll go ahead and open with you. Can you please briefly describe your current professional position and what your typical workday looks like?
Sure. My typical workday changes a lot, so it's hard to pin down a typical workday. But generally speaking, I'm currently a manager, so most of my time is spent managing people. But over the last couple of years, it's been much more hands-on focused, and that would involve developing proposals for projects which are specific to cultural resources, so archaeology, architectural history and history, and sometimes paleontology. So basically a start to finish project would consist of doing primary and secondary research. It's been challenging with COVID on doing primary research, but in a normal day, we would go to places like museums or historical societies or clerk recorder's offices, assessor's offices, places like this, and do research about a specific property to ascertain what is important about that property, or if there was anything important. So a lot of hands-on research. Writing is huge. I can't get away a day without writing something, usually historic contexts about specific areas, about specific types of resources. So buildings, bridges, dams, canals, military bases. It kind of depends on the project. So writing about how they were developed, why they were developed, and then taking that context and using a set of federal or state guidelines to determine if those resources are important. So weighing your evidence that you discovered through research, important things kind of jump up and wiggle their ears at you. So so then you take the guidelines and you establish if that property or resource is significant. And so it's a lot of time, and the reason we're doing this is to work through the environmental regulatory process, either be a federal regulatory process or a state regulatory process, sometimes local. Given day, it's a lot of writing, it's a lot of reading and research and critical thinking. It's interacting with clients and with other people on staff. Good communication is really important. Being able to just talk and normal and communicate why it is we're doing what we're doing, because I'm often working with people that are like construction folks or planners or engineers who really don't understand why my job exists or why they need to listen to me. So it's and as part of that, having a little bit of and making sure you have a good bedside manner, because it's hard not to just blow up into their faces. But so yeah, I do I wear a lot of hats, and I think that's one thing I've learned about what I do is, you have to be adaptable. And so kind of rambling, but there you go.
Thank you, Garrett. Yvette, would you like to answer the same question? Please describe for us what a day in your professional life looks like.
Hi, yes. So I'm a paralegal. It varies day to day. It's a lot of multitasking, writing, reading, critical thinking, heavy communication and translating. So I work for personal injury law that deals with clients. We work on plaintiff side, so clients who have been in car accidents, motorcycle accidents, dog bites, wrongful deaths of family members, slip and falls. And it's mostly, I do litigation work, which means that when a lawsuit is filed, I'm the one that's helping the plaintiffs out. Mostly a lot of working with the attorneys and case managers. And it varies day to day. It's a lot of multitasking, but mostly I deal with the clients. I speak to them on a daily and how their treatment is going, what's going on. I think in this field, communication is major, and you have to have good listening skills, empathy, good writing skills. And yeah, so before COVID, we had a lot of people come into our office, depositions. I deal with doctors, other attorneys, clients, but now everything's mostly remote. So a lot of emailing.
Thank you, Yvette. Zachary, would you like to answer that question next?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a book editor at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt in New York, and My title is associate editor, so that kind of means that I'm in a little bit of like a purgatory space in my career. I'm not quite a full-fledged editor, only acquiring books for myself. I do edit books for some executive editors, kind of underneath them, supporting them, but I'm also not an assistant anymore. So I do get to acquire books for myself too, and kind of manage authors on my own. I don't really know how to answer what a day-to-day looks like, because in the book world, everyone is constantly flying by the seat of their pants, and no day is the same. It's a lot of emailing. It's of course a lot of reading, because you're always getting in submissions for new book projects that you have the chance to go to auction for if you decide you want to try to buy it. Right now we're preparing to launch our next season of books. So my day-to-day is a lot of salespeople emailing me and saying, we need copy for this book by the end of the day. Can you write this copy? And then I say, shit, okay, I guess I can. So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of putting out fires, pretending to be the best friend of your author, but also like trying to rein them in and manage them too when they're being a little bit crazy, and ultimately just trying to put out good books in the world, and hoping that they make it off of bookstore shelves onto private bookshelves. So that's it.
Sounds very exciting. All right, Kelly, would you like to respond next?
Yes, of course. So I work primarily freelance at this point, so I don't have a typical work day, which I guess is pretty common across the arts. And the one constant for me is teaching. I do teach online screenwriting and creative writing courses for Southern New Hampshire University. So between that and my podcasting, which I've been fortunate enough to reach a point that I can now, make a little money off of. Those are pretty much the constants in my life. Everything else on top of that is copywriting, social media writing. I've started doing some ghostwriting. I also do a little bit of voice actor work and podcast producing. So it's kind of more of a question of like, what's the most time sensitive that'll determine what my day looks like. So a typical day for me starts with making a list of what could potentially get done that day and going over that list with color coordinated markers and a big cup of coffee. So that's pretty much where my day starts. Where it goes from there is different every single day.
I feel like our students can probably relate to that quite a bit. I know I certainly can. All right. Garrett, we're going to circle back to you on this next one. How would you describe the process of finding your career path? When did you know you were on a path that was right for you? And was it something you stumbled upon through chance or an intentional goal that you pursued? Kind of a loaded question.
It's all right. I was probably one of the stranger folks that went into Chico State knowing I wanted to be a history major. I always excelled in it. I enjoyed it. Didn't quite know first day of freshman year what I wanted to do with history. But I would say by the end of the first year, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And I credit that with to Dr. Magliari there, who told us about public history and how you can pursue a profession as a professional architect, as a professional historian. And up to that point, everyone was basically like, you can be a teacher, and nothing against teaching. I just never saw myself doing it, especially at like 21, 22 when graduating. So when he explained what public history is and what it could mean for me, I was dead set on that from that moment forward. And there was actually a class where he brought in professionals who work in what I do now and said like, oh, these are the career opportunities you can have. You can work in an archive, you can work in a museum, you can work in cultural resource management, which is what I do now. And one of the people he brought in was this guy named Steve Wee, and he worked for he was one of the co-owners of JRP Historical Consulting. And I still remember to this day, I said, I want to work for that company. And I did when I graduated. So for me, it was clear cut. I knew what I was going to do. And I made sure to get through Chico and then go on to grad school to make sure I could fulfill that.
Wonderful. That's really nice to hear that one of our faculty members had such an impact in you choosing that career path. Yvette, we're going to go ahead and shift.
I really enjoyed that presentation. That was one, all factual too.
All right, Yvette, go ahead.
So I think I kind of stumbled upon my career when I was at Chico State. I knew I wanted to incorporate post-graduation my Spanish degree, but I just didn't really know where to go or what route to go. You know, I could have gone the nonprofit way. I could have done been a teacher, but I think I just went more the route of law. I was really good at writing and editing and interpreting and translating. So I just got into that career path, and now I'm in law 4 years later. I want to pursue a graduate degree. So I think it's more like finding your passions along the way or what you're good at, you know, and how to incorporate your degree as you go, because I think that's what a lot of students graduating are kind of lost. They're like, well, I'm good at this, but can I see myself doing this 5 years later? Or how do I go about like working for something I love, but then also what I'm good at?
And Yvette, if you don't mind, I know you had mentioned that you're looking at kind of a career change as you go back into a graduate program. Can you talk a little bit about how those goals have shifted?
Yes, so I did think about law school. I had actually studied for the LSAT, and I thought about law because I was like, well, it makes sense. 4 years later, I'm a paralegal, I'm in law. But I knew when I was in undergrad, I've always had this passion for psychology, and I was in the social sciences, sociology, and I loved it a lot, but I just was kind of lost. And I thought, okay, well, being a lawyer, you know, I work with lawyers now. It's like, do I see myself doing this long term? And I had a really serious talk with my boss. And I really just weighted down, like, what do I love? Like, do I love litigating with the attorneys, or do I love helping the clients? And I said, well, I love helping the clients. You know, they speak to me, they open up to me about everything in their life. So I think that's what made me decide I'd rather become a marriage family therapist.
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
All right. Zach, turning to you.
Yeah, so I had a pretty direct, or at least intentional path to getting into books. I was an English literature major at Chico State, and I was leaving class one day, and Sarah Pape, who is in this chat right now, who I had never met before, I think literally like grabbed me on the side of the sidewalk and said, like, I know who you are. I want you to join Watershed Review. It's the lit mag on campus. Like, you should join and edit and da 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 da. So she convinced me to join, and yeah, taking the editing class with Watershed Review, I think, was the start of it. That semester coincided with AWP, this big writers conference where you meet a lot of debut authors and poets and all sorts of book nerd type people. And that really was the moment that I realized that you can work with literature and not just be working with dead literary greats. There are like new authors out there waiting to be found and published. So I think that was in one of my last semesters at Chico State. And after that, I just kind of made a beeline for books. I think I met up with an alum. I figured out that there was an alumna from the English department who worked at Chronicle Books in San Francisco, got a coffee with her. She was like, you have to take a publishing course. So then I saved up money. I went to Denver. I took a publishing course. And then in Denver, they were like, if you want to work in publishing, you have to go to New York City. So then I was like, okay, I guess I'll go to New York City. And then from there, it was like a lot of like coffee dates, trying to finagle a paid internship, and then trying to finagle that into a job, and that from there. So one thing led to another, but it did start at Watershed Review at Chico State. So.
It sounds like you put a lot of perseverance into chasing down that goal. So way to go to get there. Kelly, you're up.
Okay. Well, I came to Chico State as a theater major. I knew from when I did my first play when I was 7 years old that I wanted to be in the arts. And so I think it was during my last couple years there where I kind of started to transition less from wanting to be an actor to wanting to do a little more writing, a little more directing. And I had great opportunities to do that at Chico. We made opportunities. I joined the theater arts club, Inkblot Arts, and we put on one-act plays. The first time I ever saw a play that I had written put up. And so that's where the idea of writing as a living, I think, started, because up until then, I'd always loved to write. It just never really seemed like a potential career path but then again, I went to school for acting. So I mean, I just choose one art from the other. And so after college, I kind of had a moment, sort of like Yvette mentioned, where I wondered, like, well, what am I doing with my degree? Like, what am I, I don't want to feel like I've wasted my time. And it took a few years to realize that, like, that's never the case. There's so many different ways that you can utilize the degree that you earn. And so I decided to transition from theater into film. And I went to pursue an MFA in screenwriting. I moved to Chicago with another Chico State alumni. We packed our bags and moved to Chicago. I spent the next 2-ish years there. And I'm really thankful that I did, because I have no idea what I would be doing at this point if I hadn't done it. It's just one of those examples of say yes, take an opportunity that comes across your desk. And I'm glad that I did, because again, I have no idea what I would be doing if I hadn't done it. So from there, it went from Chicago to Los Angeles, where I dabbled in film and television, both in production and pre-production and post-production. And after a couple of years, the burnout, I think, was really real. And I sort of took a little break, and the break just went from a month to 2 months to 3 months. And to the point where I realized that I could be, instead of writing for theater or writing for film, there were so many different ways that I could incorporate the skills that I had learned both at my undergraduate degree as well as with my graduate degree, and go from there. And so it's led to some incredible opportunities that I never would have anticipated 10 years ago when I was starting college, that have somehow, in a roundabout way, gotten me to places that I did really want to go. So I'm really a believer in saying yes and trying things even when you don't know what that's going to get you. Because I think I don't have any regrets about the way that my schooling career or my professional career has gone, because every single class that I've taken, every job that I've taken has led to where I am now. And so I'm pleased with that. And so that would be my advice too for, current students is whatever you think it's going to be 10 years from now, there's no way to predict it. So just take advantage of what opportunities you have and go for it.
Thank you so much for that. So our next question, some of you have spoken to a little bit already, but starting with Garrett, please share 1 or 2 takeaways from your Chico State experience that have positively affected your career. And these can be skills, these can be like relationships built with different, members of your educational community, but anything that you feel like has positively impacted you as a professional that you can tie directly back to Chico State.
Yeah, aside from what I already said, I think the other thing is I found that there was a wider network of people that were doing similar things, but in different disciplines. So paying attention to people outside of humanities, fine arts, actually was hugely beneficial, and something that I can credit to where I am today. in terms of working through the public history certificate, I took a wide range of courses that were actually, opened up a lot more opportunities in terms of how I can think about what I would do professionally. So working with the geography departments and working with the anthropology departments. And these are people that I work with every day now. So I would say, obviously get to know your peers very well within your college or your specific discipline, but don't discount other groups, because you'd be surprised how much overlap there may be.
Thank you so much. Yvette, would you like to answer the same question?
Hi, yes. So what I took away from Chico was I studied abroad, and that was something that I always remember and I always use as something pretty fundamental in my career. And that's something I always try to tell students if they're like questioning it. I say, do it. Like kind of what Kelly said, like just say yes to the opportunity. And I think it came with me along the way. I always said, what am I going to use Spanish for later on down the road? And I've been heavily writing in Spanish now in my career. And I think that I chose a language because I was kind of contemplating, well, I'm a sociology major. Do I want to also double major in Spanish? And I'm 100% glad I did it. And I took the chance to study abroad and just perfect my Spanish skills. And now that I'm moving to another career, I'm serving a community that's not as underrepresented. I would also tell students, really get to know your professors. I think that's really important. I've kept in contact with some professors, and you don't understand how important that is. If you ever choose to go get a master's degree, you're going to need that relationship, because some professors won't remember you 5 students. And I reached out to one of the professors, and he remembered me completely from my writing and from the class 5 years later, which was really pretty phenomenal.
Yes, those faculty relationships are super valuable and might even land you on an alumni panel one day.
Yes.
Zach, would you like to respond?
Yeah, sure. I'm still trying to figure out how I want to word my answer, because I don't want this to come across wrong. But I think the biggest takeaway that I took from Chico State was that it's kind of to your benefit to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. I think when I worked at Chico, or when I was a student at Chico State, I was always taking internships. I was always scrapping for jobs. I was like paying my way through school back then. And I feel like the emphasis while I was at Chico was never that this is like a hoity-toity institution of research. This is a school where students learn kind of like with their boots on the ground how to get jobs, how to excel in your job, more so how to excel in life. I don't know if the emphasis was ever like jobs, but just how to be like a functioning human being. I don't know. And that kind of translated, that sort of like experience before research or experience before like some kind of pedigree, I guess. I think that translated really well to looking for a job in the book world, because the book world is so insular, it's so New York City, it's so Ivy League. And I really did feel like when I first started that I was going in with like something to prove. I kind of had a chip on my shoulder. I wanted to prove that like I had every bit as much of a right to be in the hallowed asbestos ridden halls of the book publishing world as much as like anyone from New York. And I think it was a huge advantage to just have like a little bit of, I don't know, like a little bit of elbow grease, like a little bit of moxie that I don't think I would have found if I had gone to like a liberal arts school in New England or something like that.
I love that. And I think that drive is something that Chico State alumni are well known for across the board. Kelly, would you like to go?
Yeah, but first I have to give Zach props for using the word moxie in his response. Like that, mwah, perfection. But yeah, no, I think I kind of want to build off of like what Garrett said, because I think Chico for me was the first time that I was living away from my family, as I think it is for, you know, a lot of students, but also it was the first time that I had to basically exist outside of a bubble, like outside of like a carefully constructed, safe bubble that I had built for myself with this group of friends in this one location. And I, at the time, found it terrifying. But today, I'm so thankful for that, because it's made it possible for me to say, hey, I'm going to move to Chicago next week. It's made it possible for me to transition into different arenas, both professionally and personally, that like I maybe wouldn't have thought about exploring before. So my favorite thing that I took away from Chico was to challenge myself and to look outside of the bubble. And that means to take classes that are in areas that you maybe are not even part of your major, not part of your minor. I tried to make it a thing to take a class every semester that was just an elective, just something that I was interested in. And because of that, I know random things about criminology and, you know, psychology of sex and relationships that I probably never would have, you know, invested my time into learning. But I think because of that, my thirst for knowledge is still so great. Like I just am so invested in always learning more, because there's always more to learn. And so that was something that I think started at Chico, because there was so much available to me that I hadn't had before. And you just had to have the courage to step outside and actually pursue it and pursue your interest in it. So I hope that's what people do.
Thank you so much for that. All right, our next question is, what activities do you engage in to keep yourself learning and growing professionally? And Garrett, you can go ahead and kick us off with this one again.
Sure. So generally the things I do outside of working in a history field is more history stuff. So I've sat on a couple of preservation boards and kind of history focused preservation organizations. It's a good way to keep in step with what's going on, you know, in your community, but also what's happening on a smaller level, which I find important and helpful in my professional career. Participating in professional organizations still is a component of, you know, keeping up to speed on what other people are doing and how to improve professionally, and reading a lot, reading government documents normally, but things, policy items, and how does that affect your career, and preservation briefs, and more of the mundane government documents. But you know, as much as history is, you know, old, our profession is evolving, and you know, I have to stay on top of that. So, you know, making sure that I'm still grounded in, you know, the how to do what I do, but also how to use technology, and make sure that, you know, I'm not letting certain aspects of technology pass me by. So, yeah, it's mostly that.
Thank you, Garrett. Yvette, how do you keep yourself learning and growing professionally?
Yeah, so I do just basically read articles or podcasts. I'm heavy into podcasts. I have a long commute, an hour a day here and back to work. So I just keep myself listening to podcasts and news, what's relevant. I think also technology is always constantly changing, and that's something we need to be up to speed in any job we have. There's have been times where people have come in into my work field, or I'm training somebody and they don't know how to use a simple Outlook or a calendar or something so simple as a PDF. And it's just like, well, we need to keep constantly just learning and keeping up to date with modern times and things that are changing within our careers and our professional lives.
Thank you. Zach?
I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I have to read a lot too. That is a big part of working in books because especially when everyone is, whether they want to admit it or not, kind of chasing the bestseller list in the New York Times, it's sort of important to keep up to speed with what is going on in the book world, just like what the trends are, who the like hot writers of the moment are, and what people want to read. So there's that. I, for the past couple of years, have been getting really into Dungeons and Dragons, which actually I have found has been a very good way of honing my writing skills. When you have to hone a character backstory into like a few paragraphs, it really like fine tunes copywriting skills that I've quite frankly always sucked at. Like I was a really horrible copywriter for book jackets, and I think that helped a lot. Also, the world is such a horrible, vicious place. It's nice to escape into a different one for a while. And last of all, I've just gotten really involved in the like labor movement side of the book publishing world. It's a very slow progressing, kind of archaic, old money institution, and it's been kind of really struggling to respond to the moment we're in with like the Black Lives Matter uprisings and COVID and all of this stuff. So yeah, I've been getting more into the labor equity side of things in the book world, and that has actually kind of kept the fire burning a little bit. We actually just won a fight to raise entry-level salaries at my publisher last week, so it's sort of like puts wind in your sails even when the work can get monotonous. So
Congratulations. That is wonderful and definitely a good way to stay motivated, having wins like that. Kelly.
So I also read like everybody else, but I mean, unlike Zach, who works professionally in publishing, I run a podcast that's dedicated to reading and reviewing romance novels. And so I also read a lot. Beyond the podcast, I think reading is really important if you want to be a great writer. I think that and it's not just reading what you want to write. I read nonfiction, I read essays, I try to read a little bit of everything, and I read every day. And it's the same thing that I tell my students too, is just that pick up something to read. It could be a fanfic, it can be a graphic novel, it can be a poem, whatever it is, just read something. And so I'm always trying to read. I also am a huge fan of education, like I've said. So I'm always taking classes. I have been taking sketch writing classes. I've been taking improv classes with Second City and IO before they closed for the last 3 or 4 years. And so if I'm not, I feel like I need to keep myself busy, and that's a great way to do it while also honing some new skills. And then the last thing is that when I moved to Los Angeles, it was instilled in us very early on that if you wanted to work in film and television, you needed to know how to network. And I'm sure that applies to just about any profession, but I've made it, you know, kind of a thing to join clubs and get to know people. I know during the pandemic, I found that especially beneficial, being a part of virtual book clubs or virtual movie, you know, Netflix and chill clubs. Like it's been a great way to stay social, because I think as much as I love the academic side of growing and learning professionally, I think there's also a huge social side to growing professionally. And so that's been a great way to stay in touch with people, as well as like garner some, you know, new professional connections. But I also watch a lot of movies. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, but I've been told that I should. So I don't know, maybe that's the next step.
Thank you so much. Okay, we are going to round out with kind of like our last formal question for the group, and then we'll open the floor to everyone else to ask any questions they might have. And this might be a tougher one, but hopefully will leave us off on sort of a motivating note. So Garrett, we'll start with you. Given our current COVID situation, some students may have a gap between graduation and employment. What advice do you have for our students to keep themselves motivated through this time and maintain confidence that the right opportunity will eventually emerge?
Yeah, no, COVID's been difficult. I will say, though, that within certain disciplines and certain professions, I've actually seen companies moving to hire more people. I got hired in October with my current position, did not expect to change jobs during a pandemic. Most of it is just putting yourself out there, making yourself employable and relevant, and keeping up to date. Networking's huge. I found a job through LinkedIn. Like, that's why I have a job, this job currently. Yes, just be annoying. Be the one that, you know, you really want to be. If you really want it, you really have to go pursue it. And I've found that there are people out there looking to hire. I have 4 or 5 jobs open right now. Like, there are jobs out there. You just have to really want it, and yeah, be annoying, honestly.
Thank you. Yvette?
Hi, yeah, so the legal field, there's always plenty of jobs. It's always, somebody's always getting sued, you know? So it's it's just, I think you just have to stay pretty, like what Garrett said, stay relevant, persistent, be the person who you do your research on that company, or the person you're being interviewed with, and, you know, go as far as, okay, we'll bring up something that you found relevant to both of you. I also think networking is key, especially right now in this pandemic. I think it's really important to know your alumni, know other people from other types of job fields, and just stay persistent. And I know it's really hard to do that right now with the economy and unemployment being so high. But like he said, if you really want it, you will go for it, and you will do whatever it takes to stand out from the others.
Thank you. Zach?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I do not envy anyone who is graduating right now. It sounds horrible. That being said, I would encourage you to think a little bit outside of the box with what jobs and where those jobs are that you're applying to, because in like a weird cattywampus way, there are a lot of industries that used to be very geologically locked, like locked in one city or one place, that are no longer, or at least for the time being, are not like that because of COVID and because offices are like death traps. So book publishing, for example, it used to be that if you weren't in New York City, there was no chance in hell you were getting a job in book publishing, and you would have to literally like find a friend's address and put it on your resume and like fool the hirer to thinking that you live in this, and then like book your flight to interview. You don't have to do that anymore. Most book publishers now have remote internships since everyone is remote. So theoretically, if you wanted to be an editorial intern or a publicity intern or something like that for one of the big five, now it's four, for one of the big four publishers, you could do that from your room theoretically. Yeah, take advantage of the moment in that way. I also understand that that's easier said than done. So I'm not going to do the whole like, just get a job, put yourself out there. Obviously, the economy is crashing. So if you can't find something, I would just say that, if you want to go into the arts, if you're looking to go into storytelling in some way, maybe just take the moment to really hone your craft and your writing, whatever samples you're going to use to try and like get your foot through the door. If you're screenwriting, if you're whatever it is, just like take the time maybe to polish your craft and come in hot once things open up a little more again.
Thank you, Zach. All right, Kelly, rounding out with you.
All right. Yeah, I'm actually going to echo that last bit that Zach was talking about, because I think while you're looking for jobs, keep doing that. But I think that it's hard to say that the pandemic is like a great opportunity, but it's like, I do think there have been opportunities provided to us because of the pandemic, where a lot of us have a lot more time at home. A lot of us find ourselves with less work, which sucks on the one hand. I totally understand. But at the same time, I think it's a matter of what do you do with that time? So if you have that time, I've seen how my friends that I went to school with at Chico State, who are professional actors, I see how they've been affected by this. But if you have that time, maybe it's you start a YouTube channel, a TikTok, that's big with the kids. Maybe you're writing a book. Maybe this is the time to build your professional website and update your resume and cover letter so that you are ready to send those things out to prospective employers. Because there are jobs, and there are maybe not the jobs you envisioned, but I think there are jobs out there to be found and to be had if you do want them. So keep looking. Don't let what's going on, keep you from looking. But at the same time, I think it's also a matter of I can't make them hire me. I can't make them get back to me in a certain amount of time. What can I do in the meantime? What is within my zone of control? And if it's taking a class online, or if it's writing, a short story, whatever it might be to better yourself professionally so that you are prepared, I think that's what you can be doing.
All right, thank you all so much for your very thoughtful responses to all of our questions. We are going to go ahead and open the conversation now to our audience members. So students, faculty, staff, if you have questions for our panelists, please feel free to either raise your hand if you'd like to speak the question, or you can go ahead and put it in the chat, which has just been activated. Okay, it looks like we have a hand up from Jacob. Jacob, would you like to go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks so much. First of all, thank you all for being here. I really, really appreciate it. I'm a senior, almost graduating, gonna take a little bit of time to do so, but I'm a double major in English education and musical theater. So a lot of like what y'all are speaking to is really speaking my language as far as like my career goals and wanting to write and do all of that. My question specifically was for Kelly, just because you have a lot of like similarities in like path and things you're interested in that I do. Our program right now, as far as theater goes, like debates a lot of the time about the necessity of grad school for like any sort of like job that we're looking for, anything. There's a lot of back and forth about whether it's worth doing or if you don't really necessarily need it. And so I kind of wanted to hear your perspective on that. Do you think it was like largely beneficial and necessary to go, especially for something like screenwriting, because it's something I'm very interested in as well? And yeah, so just how would you describe your graduate experience? Was it super like necessary and vital for the work you're doing?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you for asking. I personally, and again, I cannot be the voice of reason for grad school as a choice, but for me personally, it was absolutely 100% the right decision. And I think it's because when I finished school at Chico, I knew that I had this background in the arts. I wanted to work in the arts, but I didn't know what the next step was. I didn't know if I wanted to go get a teaching credential, and I didn't know if I wanted to, pursue teaching full time, or if I wanted to move to New York and be on Broadway. But so I think as I kind of perused the options, it was a great way to focus in. And that's the great thing about grad school, is that if you're going to school for theater and education, you're also learning a little bit of everything along the way. You're taking your your elective courses and your foundation courses. But what's great about grad school is that you focus in specifically on a certain area that you want to learn more about. And for me, it was screenwriting, but there's broader programs as well for like cinematic arts. So I happen to love it. I don't know if I would say there's an end all be all, like you have to go to grad school, because I've met plenty of people working who didn't go to college that have pursued careers in the arts. But at the same time, I know people who have gone the MFA route. I do think an MFA is great if you're pursuing acting for stage, just because it helps you hone the craft. And I think it's great for writers as well. I think you'll think differently about writing if you do have extra experience in grad school. But again, that's my personal experience. I'm sure other people would tell you differently. I'm a huge fan. I'm happy to talk to anybody more about it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and jump to Yvette. Looks like you have a question as well.
Yeah, this one's more directed towards Zach, because I also am thinking of getting into the publishing industry. I just don't know exactly what aspect, because I know there's a lot besides editing, but like, what is one of your favorite things about your job, and what is your least favorite thing about your job?
Great question. Such a loaded question. It changes all the time. The one like stalwart that has always stayed the same is just editing. Like a really great day of work, also a really rare day of work, is when I can just like turn my email off, like say to hell with all of my coworkers and people emailing me for deadlines, and sit with a manuscript and work on, either big structural edits, or if I'm line editing, whichever one it is. I really actually love my current position, because I work so much. I work for myself editing, but I also work for editors above me, that a lot of my job is in manuscripts, and it's just the best part. And it's kind of what everyone thinks the job is mostly, but really it's like such a small fraction of it. But it's definitely the best. Least favorite part of the job, oh God, what is it? I'd say my least favorite part of the job is honestly just the like administrative deadline flood. Working in book publishing requires an immense amount of organizational acumen that, quite frankly, I do not have. I was not born with. I had never honed it to a point where I can like really get away with the workload all the time. It's just like, it really does take a lot of is it right brain, or is it like one of the brain, the side of the brain that's like organizational and compartmentalizing things? That's my least favorite part. And so, you know, there are always just deadlines to keep track of. There are always meetings to attend. There are always going to be like tiny little things to update in databases and stuff like that, and spreadsheets to track. And I really couldn't be bothered with it, but unfortunately I have to. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And thank you all for your information. Thank you.
Okay, we have one more question in the chat, and then April, I will jump to you as I see your hand is up, and you will be our last question of the afternoon. The question in the chat comes from James and asks, my question is, how does one get to be a copywriter? Are any of you able to answer that one?
I'll take a stab at that one because that is what I do sometimes. But that's one of those ones that I kind of stumbled into in between TV gigs and just kind of ran with it. So for me, it was sort of a one-off job that I was then recommended to somebody else for somebody else's services, and then somebody else from there. And so to the point where I found myself kind of writing social media copy, marketing info, you know, newsletters and everything for all sorts of different kinds of industries. I will say, I think the one thing that's left that's great about Facebook is connecting with people through groups, especially. That's really the only reason I still have a Facebook, is because I'm part of so many different groups that are there. That's where a lot of authors run their fan groups. It's also where you find writing groups and copywriters groups who share job posts with each other. So I think it's largely a networking sort of thing, is just sort of building a network. At the same time, I think the more writing you're doing on your own, just so that you have something to show for yourself, is always great. So whether it's, you know, you just kind of want to start doing some personal projects yourself, or even reaching out to local businesses, social media accounts and saying, hey, this is what I do. Can I talk about what I can do for you? You know, like we said earlier, be annoying, pester those people. If they say no, they say no. But what's the worst thing is that you're putting yourself out there.
Thank you so much.
All right, our last question is going to be from April. April, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, it's actually about networking, because I'm a writer, but I'm also in Watershed Review, and I'm just trying to think. And then I'm older too. I'm not, you know, in my 20s. So I'm trying to figure out what is the best way to put myself out there as far as networking, because that's one of the things that I've always been terrible at. So I just want to kind of some advice on how to kind of be able to do that.
I'll jump in. I think you find your people, and you find the groups that are applicable and network through them. I think by making individual connections with certain people is better than just like, you know, throwing spaghetti at the wall. So if it's a matter of being able to find, you know, an organization that does what you do, or find, you know, professional organization, or like just even like a community group that's doing something like that, I think that's a good way to make connections. I've found that the one-on-one connections pay dividends way more than ones done through online anyway.
Zach, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I also kind of piggybacking off of the idea of finding your people. A huge part of the book industry is networking, like after hours and rubbing elbows with people and all that kind of stuff. And I also really can't stand it. It's also one of my least favorite parts of the job. But I think a good thing to remember when you're working on networking and getting better at it is to just be very kind to yourself, and you don't have to set really lofty goals. people don't really want to be treated like a stepping stone or like a rung in a ladder to a goal anyway. And I think it's important to remember that when you're networking, that at the end of the day, you're kind of just making friends and you're trying to meet people and hopefully make an impression where that, makes them feel like they want to have you around more and like want to see you more day to day and what they're doing. And I found that, being a little bit less rigorous with what I want to get out of networking, it makes me feel a lot better when, I don't necessarily have like an amazing event, or if I feel like I'm going slow, just kind of chill. That's what I think.
I'll add to that too and just say, I think if you think of it less as networking and more as just like building relationships, because I feel like most of the people I've met networking have become really good friends. And if it's led to things professional, great. If it's we have a social media relationship and we send each other funny memes, also great. So I will say, I think social media has been really big for writers and artists in general, especially during the pandemic, but whatever works for you, because it's not going to be the same thing for everybody. And we have to stop comparing ourselves to other people at the same time and think that we're doing something wrong because somebody else is doing it differently than us. So whatever works for you and whatever way you find yourself building connections best, do it, roll with it.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your participation in the panel today. We are at time for this event, but we do again want to extend our sincerest thanks to our panelists for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and speak with our students. And to our audience members, please remember this is a series of events. So our next event will be next Wednesday at 3. It is our Designing Your Resume workshop. I went ahead and put a link in the chat so you all can check out the upcoming events for this semester. Thank you again, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, you too.